News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
I said, why did you not come earlier for treatment if you've known about it? And I've been here. And she said, I called your nurse and there was a 8-month wait to see you. And I would have to drive 200 miles each way while getting this chemotherapy-like treatment. And I'm a single mother, and there's no way I could take that much time off work, coming 12 times, because there were no specialists in my rural area. So I said, okay, I got it, why you didn't come, but why did you come today? She said, I'm having pain here. And I did an ultrasound of her liver, and she had a cancer of her liver this big. She had cirrhosis, we could not resect it, too big for a liver transplant, and she passed away 6 months later. And I was asking myself, why did she die of a disease that I knew how to treat? And I had the medicine and all the diagnostic tests were there, and the answer was she died because the right knowledge didn't exist at the right place at the right time, and she didn't have the ability to get to the right knowledge. Now I know that 6 billion people in the world don't have access to the right knowledge at the right place at the right time. And tens of billions die unnecessarily. So I wasn't thinking of the whole world. The problem I was facing was in New Mexico, there were 28,000 patients with hepatitis C. Only 1,500 had been treated. And my immediate problem was people were coming in, dying of cirrhosis and liver cancer in my own clinic. And I didn't know what to do because there were no specialists in rural areas. So I said I would do what Don Ravik described. I would multiply myself. I would do what is called force multiplication, exponentially improve my capacity to deliver best practice care. And I developed, one day I was meditating at Christmas time, we get along, and I was asking this question, what should I do here about this problem? And I got this idea of Project Echo. And it's really based on 4 ideas. One was to use technology to leverage my expertise and that of a psychiatrist. And there was no Zoom, so I bought a telecommunication bridge, put it under my basement. I used one, it cost me about $25,000, and put it in the basement. And I created something like Zoom where there was no cloud, but people would call into this bridge, basically. And I went around the state of New Mexico and found 21 clinicians all over New Mexico who would be willing to treat if I trained them. So I shared my best practice with them, but they said, no, we can't do this. This is like chemotherapy. We are primary care clinicians. This is too risky for us. So I asked myself, how did you become an expert? And when I did my fellowship in Boston, I would see a patient, present to my professor, see another one professor, and after 2 years they said, you're a gastroenterologist. I said, aha! I said, why can't I use this same model of all teach, all learn, case-based learning, guided practice to create new hepatitis C-ologists and short-circuiting this residency program and fellowship. Let them sit where they are. So that's the third principle of ECHO, was this case-based learning, guided practice, and all teach, all learn. And it looked like a Zoom call where all 21 would join Wednesday at 3 p.m. and present patients to each other. We would discuss about 8 patients, and I'd give them a 15-minute lecture. As I did this week after week, in 1 year they became such great experts. Their results were looking as good as mine. But in 18 months, the wait in my clinic had gone down to 2 weeks from 8 months. Over the next many years, we treated 10,000 patients in New Mexico. But all this was going on, and we were doing studies, publishing papers. ECHO was producing joy of work for them, building community. But the world wasn't changing until I got a federal grant, and I published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2011, in which we showed that these rural doctors and prison clinicians could give chemotherapy and get the same results as us at the University of New Mexico. But there are only 2 million people living there, so 6 billion don't have the right knowledge. So I said, I democratized the expertise and the implementation of it. adequately. But now I need to democratize my ability to do echo. So I want to teach anyone in the world, any university in the world who wants to do echo, I want to give them echo for free. And I met with Eric Wan, his representative, I think he's here today. And I told him, look, I want to help 1 billion people. How should I do that? And he was kind enough to give me the Zoom license for the whole world. So a lot of people in the remotest parts of Africa and India, they use our Zoom license. And I met somebody by the name of Nandan Nilikani and Rohini, whom you were going to see in a little while. They're going to be here. And they helped us develop this technology platform, which we call iEcho, which is a software piece. It cost us about $10 million to develop it, but now we give this software piece, the Zoom license is embedded in it, to organizations all over the world. So all the major universities in the United States have replicated Echo. Stanford does 17 networks, UCSF, etc. Harvard, Hopkins, MD Anderson. So we have 483 academic hubs in the United States, 1,300 in the world. We have 5.8 million learners in these 205 countries and areas and states. And we have improved the health of between 200 and 300 million people in the world. What we found was, why does training not work? Why is there no randomized control trial showing that training will improve outcomes, etc.? I thought the traditional training we've learned now is like if you had a garden in the back of your house and you flooded it with all the water it needed for a year and hoped that the garden would keep growing the whole year. But you know, what you do is you do a drip irrigation system instead. And so this high dose, low frequency method of traditional training actually doesn't work. And so in Echo, what we did is we were able to put the training model and turn it on its head essentially. To say, okay, yes, we will do the drip irrigation, but that even alone will not work because that is knowledge. There's a second step, at least in Echo, of what we call reflection. That in an Echo session, the learners talk half the time. That's a rule. So they have to reflect back what they learn and present cases, real patients they're seeing. That's reflection. And the third step in Echo is implementation. In between there, week after week, they go and treat patients under guidance. That's the third step. And the fourth is sharing, because I think what you heard very nicely from Jeff is learning is contextual. Treating hepatitis C in New Mexico is not the same as treating it in Sudan. These learners create new learnings. In Echo, they share it back. So what we realized was deep learning to implement is a 4-stage process. Learning, reflection, implementation, and then sharing back what you've learned. Creating new knowledge. Democratize implementation of expertise over and above resources. Why? Because the physics of knowledge is different. Knowledge works more like love and joy and kindness and respect. It grows with sharing, whereas material resources diminish when you share. So this is a very efficient way. And what we found was, we changed our mission to say, we'll democratize Echo to help organizations achieve their mission with speed, scale, high quality, and low cost. The moment we said we'll help other organizations that become a meta-intervention, we found we got 100x on the investment. So an example was, for every dollar Echo spends in India for TB, which is one of our largest programs, the Prime Minister had asked us to work on it, the government spends $100 of their own money. Why? Because it's their drugs, their experts in their TB centers, it's their gene expert machines, it's their kits, it's their medicine, it's their nutrition, everything. So what you're doing is, when you democratize the implementation of expertise, you get 100x. And I think that is the second learning I had. The third was, technology alone doesn't solve the problem. We are human beings. At least what Echo did, and this is what I really say why Echo works, is it builds communities of practice. It's about love and respect and empathy and kindness, sharing, for human good. When you bring all of these together, you get something. A tech platform is necessary, and you create these human networks. You can actually create huge change. And the government of Kenya, Wangari Shah, just published data showing that it was costing them $800 per doctor trained in Western Kenya for HIV. Of course, they were using US government PEPFAR funds. And with ECHO, it cost them $20.96. So you can get a very high return on investment if you focus on building expertise, because then these people will use their existing resources, their context to solve their problems, as opposed to a US HIV expert or US FC expert. So those were some of the learnings: community, the physics of knowledge and ROI, and turning the traditional training model on its head, rather than just putting water in the garden once a year. Democratize implementation of expertise over and above resources. Why? Because the physics of knowledge is different. Knowledge works more like love and joy and kindness and respect. It grows with sharing, whereas material resources diminish when you share. So this is a very efficient way. And what we found was, we changed our mission to say, we'll democratize ECHO to help organizations achieve their mission with speed, scale, high quality, and low cost. The moment we said we'll help other organizations that become a meta-intervention, we found we got 100x on the investment. So an example was, for every dollar ECHO spends in India for TB, which is one of our largest programs, the Prime Minister had asked us to work on it, the government spends $100 of their own money. Why? Because it's their drugs, their experts in their TB centers, it's their gene expert machines, it's their kits, it's their medicine, it's their nutrition, everything. So what you're doing is, when you democratize the implementation of expertise, you get 100x. And I think that is the second learning I had. The third was, technology alone doesn't solve the problem. We are human beings. At least for ECHO did. And this is what I really say why ECHO works, is it builds communities of practice. It's about love and respect and empathy and kindness, sharing for human good. When you bring all of these together, you get something. A tech platform is necessary, and you create these human networks. You can actually create huge change. And the government of Kenya, Wangari Shah, just published data showing that it was costing them $800 per doctor trained in Western Kenya for HIV. Of course, they were using US government PEPFAR funds. And with ECHO, it cost them $20.96. So you can get a very high return on investment if you focus on building expertise, because then these people will use their existing resources, their context to solve their problems, as opposed to a US HIV expert or US FC expert. So those were some of the learnings: community, the physics of knowledge and ROI, and turning the traditional training model on its head, rather than just putting water in the garden once a year. It improves patient outcomes, 85 publications. So I'm asking myself, so what is the next step? And I've been reflecting on this concept of the highest return on investment. What is the highest return? So what I've come up with is that there are 42 million excess deaths occurring in the global south in non-communicable chronic disease, basically. 42 million deaths every year. Every year, 42 million people are dying. So let's take what Soumya was talking about. What's the biggest cause of this, right? Diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. Let's just take these three. Because why they call strokes, kidney failure, heart attacks, etc. There was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine, the Bible of medicine, right? Randomized controlled trial called the STEM2 trial. What they did is they used the least expensive medicines, which even in Africa will cost less than 30 cents for a day for treating cholesterol, statins, and metformin for diabetes, and blood pressure medicine, what we call these lisinopril type of agents, ACE inhibitors. You give all of them for 20%, right? And that's what this randomized control trial showed. You can reduce mortality by 50%. Now let's go to Africa for a moment and start thinking. They have blood pressure instruments, they can measure blood glucose, and they can measure cholesterol. You do that and you use this 20, you have everything you need. If there was a trained doctor there who knew how to diagnose, and yet you can reduce mortality by 50% right there and then for those diseases. Nothing else but the expertise is required. So I asked two questions. If you need a neurosurgeon there, ECHO is not going to get it there. But there are some diseases like this which is slow-hanging fruit. There's another trial called the ADVANCE trial in the New England Journal of Medicine, randomized control trial showing if you lower blood pressure by 5 millimeters or even between 3 and 5 millimeters of mercury, you reduce mortality. And yet, we learned from Soumya last night, only 15% of the people in the world, in the global south, are getting treatment for hypertension. So, when I'm thinking return on investment, I'm thinking capacity building, but I'm thinking, what's the lowest hanging fruit where I can save lives today just by democratizing the implementation of best practices? There are a few other things like that, like breast exams and cervical cancer prevention and so on and so on. But that's where I plan to focus the next few years of my life. And if any of you are working in those areas and want to work with us, even if you're not a philanthropist, you are an implementer, please reach out to our team here. We want to partner with you.